By way of update on my CAG-related activities, I've continued to investigate the waste and/or toxic materials that have been generated within, stored on, or disposed at, and transported from the areas that have variously been designated through time as operable Unit 2 at the Vasquez Boulevard and I-70 Superfund site. For those of you not familiar with where OU2 is, it's a area that is sort of centered on the parking lots south and west of the Denver Coliseum and the Globeville Landing Park. So that's where this area is. This investigation area, or investigating this area, is pretty slow work, and it is at times pretty tedious. It's also very complicated. It's a site that has generated, received, and/or exported waste or toxic materials for some 150 years, virtually a time period that covers all major industrial areas from the late 19th century through the 20th century and into the 21st century. So you're looking at an industrial history that includes metal refinement, chemicals, fossil fuels, and radiological and nuclear eras in American industry, all of which need to be considered with respect to this particular site. Once I can get a grasp on the history and the associated toxic material streams as they can be identified associated with this site, I'll start structuring what I refer to as my ghost remedial investigation, so that I can offer the CAG something to compare to what will be coming out of the city and county of Denver by way of EPA. So that work is continuing at this point in the absence of my having an opportunity to review anything that any of the agencies are working on. That's really my CAG-related work, but there are a couple of other items that have come to my attention since the last CAG meeting that I wanted to bring up. One is a letter that I received on July 10th through Bridget that I had an opportunity to review. It's a July 9th letter from EPA to Bridget. EPA's letter was written in response to a broad-ranging letter to them from Bridget using her personal email account, and she did identify herself as a CAG member. Bridget discussed a number of issues related to the EPA CAG and resident relationships related to EPA's performance at the Superfund site and with respect to the CAG. EPA's letter saddened me. It didn't surprise me, but it did sadden me. As I interpret the letter, it was considered an opportunity to make it clear to Bridget, and presumably through Bridget to the CAG, what she, and therefore the CAG, can expect from EPA, and what they can expect from EPA appears to be what they have gotten from the EPA for the last 2 years. It does not appear to suggest anything that will improve cooperative attempts and efforts to assess and remediate the contamination, even within the Superfund site, let alone considering whether that Superfund site is adequate to deal with the problems at GES. The first paragraph actually professes EPA's pride in how they have behaved in the past. The bulk of the rest of the letter uses the same brush and the same pastel colors to describe once again how they want the public to perceive those activities and how to perceive what they purport to have accomplished. I do wish that EPA's picture were accurate, but it isn't. And as again described in that letter, it borders on obfuscation. Particularly disheartening to me is EPA's lead paragraph to Bridget under the category of CAG meetings. Paraphrase, it's, so you're unhappy with how we deal with the CAG. In a nutshell, tough, live with it. To quote specifically, while we understand that you may not have always agreed with the responses given by or decisions made by EPA personnel, our goal is to provide that information in a meaningful and respectful manner and ensure that our communications remain productive. I urge the CAG to continue to stew and to protest and object to the way EPA has been treating it and how it has been responding to EPA's, or to the CAG's attempt to serve its statutory and regulatory role, not as just a provider of public comment, but as an advisor to the EPA. It needs to continue to worry its pretty little head about what is happening compared to what should be happening, and to draw attention to what has been done as opposed to the way what has been done is being described. I urge you to continue to try and get EPA responses and responsiveness in writing when something is amiss. But it's clear that is not their intent. Unfortunately, your work remains cut out for you. One of the issues that Bridget brought up was the issue of racism and or how that intersects with social justice or environmental justice. Bridget accused no one, and I don't feel that anyone is being accused of deliberate racism. But that doesn't mean that the process is clean of it. I have worked on 2 neighborhood Superfund sites, both in the same time frame, that had remarkable similarities in contaminants that were being assessed, in the industry origin of those contaminants, the incomes of the neighborhoods, the style and density of housing, the ages of the neighborhoods, the location of the neighborhoods relative to industry, major roads, rail lines, just almost lay down comparisons. The outcomes or the assessments making it to the rod are that the residual levels of lead and arsenic deemed to be below unacceptable risk at GES triggered emergency removal response at the other site. The difference between the two, the most obvious two differences that I can see, is they were in different EPA regions, and there is a difference in the skin color and nations of origin of the residents. EPA, I urge you, don't dismiss these concerns. Be uncomfortable about them, accept that discomfort, and make sure that what has been done in the past and is being done in the past is consistent with what is being done elsewhere in the country in comparable settings. So that's one set of comments I wanted to make. The other one came up, and there isn't much to comment on about it, but many of you may have seen that Pepsi is selling their facilities in operable Unit 2. My guess will be that is going to precipitate a lot of changes in how City and County of Denver wants to deal with OU2, changes that it will discuss with and present to EPA and CDPHE, but probably not the CAG, unless the CAG can get the other agencies to involve it. But I am quite certain, based upon my experience in Denver, that City and County of Denver is going to quickly change OU2 to move the Pepsi property out of it and deal with the contamination of that site as it has been characterized so far, and the portions of it that have not been characterized because they're under the footprint of the building, moved that to the voluntary cleanup program and out of the Superfund program in order to eliminate, to a very great extent, any public process associated with the cleanup and the declaration that the property is ready for redevelopment. I don't think that should be possible to do. I don't think it's right to do it, but I do expect that effort to be made, and everybody in the CAG needs to watch every newspaper, every source they have of what's going on environmentally in Denver and report it among other members of the CAG as soon as they hear about it. So that's my update and my two comments. I've probably exceeded the window I had, but if there are questions, if there are time for questions, and if someone can read me any questions that are in writing, I will answer.
I think we have time for one question, if anybody has one, and then we'll have Adrian introduce Dr. Lamphere. Any questions? I don't see any in the chat. Yeah, go ahead, Joan. And we could get that information for you, Weston. Go ahead, Joan.
Can you unmute yourself when you want to chat?
Hi,
Hello?
sorry about that.
Hello,
Thank you.
Doctor.
Can you hear me? Are you able
Yes.
to hear me now? Chuck, thank you very much for that thorough assessment. Pepsi, when Pepsi decided to not lease the property anymore that they're on, they bought the property from Denver, and that happened a couple of months just before it became a Superfund site, the operable Unit 2. So Chuck, you're right, it will be interesting because there was serious contamination under Pepsi. And that Denver does a lot of let's build on top instead of clean it up. It's a lot cheaper. So I'll be looking forward to the proposal to move Pepsi or get Pepsi to really talk about what's under their property.